Good afternoon. John, can you hear me? You're on mute. Not sure if you can hear me though.
Yes, I can hear you. There you go. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very good. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. I'm just letting David Loseby in to join us.
Great. And so you're in the States, are you?
No, I'm in Canada, Ottawa,
Canada.
the
Very
nation's
nice.
capital.
Is is that where you live?
Yes, that's where I live.
Very nice.
Hey,
Um,
David.
Hi,
David,
John.
hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Very good. Thank you. And you?
Very good, thank you. Very good. Sun shining in London. It's freezing cold though, so about normal.
Yes,
Strange,
absolutely. We have some
strange
sunshine
weather.
here.
It can be very strange weather there. Like it can snow and then melt in the same day, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we
But I
can do.
will tell you, when I visited London a number of years ago to give a speech or a lecture at eWorld, I
Yeah.
walked downtown, and there's
Yeah.
certain cities you go to where you feel the history.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you're in some places that have been around a long, long time.
Yeah.
So it's a great feel, the city.
It's I enjoy it. I love it. So it's home, and I don't plan on changing that anytime soon.
Right, absolutely. Now, David, who else is joining us?
I think you put the invite out actually, John,
Yeah.
to be fair. So I've not invited anybody else.
No, but
Okay.
we at the same time we were all connecting. I caught up with someone who I used to work with, Howard Price,
Yes.
who knows David very well. So he introduced me to David over email at the same time we were connecting over LinkedIn. So
All right.
Correct.
Well, do you want to just get started, and when he
yeah,
joins, we can join because I've got a hard
yeah,
stop in 30 minutes.
that's fine. Perfect. It were let me just maybe give backgrounds on myself and kind of what we're doing from a simple perspective, and then I'll try and do that for as short a time period as possible, and then we can just get straight into it. So, background on me: I've spent for my sins the last sort of 15 years in procurement and in digital procurement and in digital procurement in the public sector, predominantly in the UK. And started, and I expect you know the landscape a little bit. I helped GPS, what was GPS, become CCS, um, and then I moved into. So I basically done it across the entirety of the public sector. So I moved into a role in the multi academy trust education part of the market, helping to set out basically what the commercial and digital design for a shared services business would be, where they were centralizing procurement amongst other services. Realized how broken procurement was in schools, and then went down a bit of a rabbit warren for a while. Came out of that, and went on back once a comment to Crown Commercial Service, helping them on the ill-fated marketplace program. So helping set out the kind of commercial and digital strategy for that. And I think one of the things that became really, really clear to me then was that um, neither government nor the private sector are going to get this right in its current form. So central buying organizations compete with each other, so therefore none of them are incentivized to really fundamentally change how procurement works in the public sector, and uh, and therefore they won't be able to build technology that will do that effectively. And all of the existing technology providers are all still the same group that have been around since the late 90s, early noughties, and are all are uh, unable to change for various different reasons. And so I did that for a while, left, and then about 5 years ago set out to build Cimple. So we talk a lot about building a platform that supports the millions of informal buyers across every part of both the private sector and the public sector. So rather than coming at this from a procurement software needs to be really complicated, we and therefore needs to do a lot. We come at it from a very basic set of principles around actually can a receptionist in a school pick up our platform and use it to buy an IT contract. And there are a number of different things that we do differently from other platforms. Again, some of this stuff has been tried before. I think so that when I'm speaking to people who actually know what they're talking about in detail, I go, well, we're not really doing anything that's actually that different, but it's the combination of market opportunity, technology, things that are moving, the user experience we're building. We're building a single instance platform, which is fundamentally different to multi-instance, multi-tenanted SaaS as an offering, which is where we think supply chain software gets it very wrong generally. because you don't have the ability to actually create aggregated power of a supply chain. So going back to some of the core principles of what SAP Ariba was built around. So probably lots of things going full circle, but starting to really now see quite significant traction and interest, both private sector and public sector.
Wow. No, Dave, did you want to go? Did you want to go first, or
I'll pause.
Yeah, so I mean, I probably should say that I classify myself as a pracademic, so I'm a practitioner and academic at the same time, which can get confusing at times because I have to spin my hat around and do different things. But ultimately, I've probably spent 20 odd years being a chief procurement officer. I've spent countless years working in academia in various sort of guises, either as on the receiving end of having to do a PhD, or on the flip side, lecturing and developing programs and all sorts of other things like that, and actually supporting early to mid-career researchers in particular in terms of their sort of research endeavors. So my last sort of gig in anger was putting in a digital platform in for Rolls-Royce PLC, so aerospace and defense. So we had a different platform for directs and indirects, different functionalities you can imagine, all that kind of stuff. So, but I can also wind back my experience back to the 90s, dare I say, hence the grey hair, in sort of getting involved in sort of the early days of e-auctions and wonderful stuff like that, and then having to rewrite the damn thing because it just didn't work. So I guess I've got a long history in sort of digital procurement, but procurement and supply chain, and mainly change and transformation, but from a multicultural perspective. So as John knows, I mean, I've lived and worked in different countries and geographies for many years too. So I'm not a typical Anglo-Saxon, if you like, that just sits there and thinks that everything is the same, because it's not. So I don't know whether that helps sort of give some of the muddy background.
All right.
Definitely does.
You know what? Let me give you a little bit in terms of my background. I started in high tech and procurement in the early 80s. So I go to the day of the K-Pro and the CPM and all of that. In terms of public sector procurement, this is interesting. The Government of Canada's Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program funded my strand commonality theory to create a platform to buy MRO parts for the Department of National Defense, which was struggling to meet their next day delivery requirements. Pricing was out of whack, whatever, in that regard. And I developed it using an agent-based model. Ultimately, I sold that company at the height of the .com. I regret that now sometimes. .com for about 12 million, because I was not interested in going the VC route or going public. It just, I liked it. But for the D&D and then for the New York City Transit Authority, it really gave me a perspective from the provider and practitioner side of the complexity of public sector procurement. For example, in Canada, we have the CFIB, which is Canadian Federation of Independent Business. And I've worked and interviewed extensively Corinne Pullman over there, and she indicates that 90% of her membership will not touch government business, public sector business, to save their lives. It's just not worth the cycles. And a lot of the feedback is we put in this automated technology where you punch in what you provide, how you do it, fill it all in, get it there, and then you get notified of RFPs. And this goes into the next one, talking with Judy Brad and Al Gordon in the US. Al Gordon was one of the chief advisors to the original Governor Cuomo. And in the interview, he said, well, to tell you the truth, 90 to 95% of all RFP winners are decided before the RFP is issued. And it was interesting because Judy said, well, I go more like this. Most organizations who respond to RFP requests, respond to bid requests, really are like a runner showing up at a marathon, having never trained to run, and expecting to win the race. And the whole idea is that, and so you watch that element of it in the government. I've covered Virginia's EVA initiative, which is one of the few successful, sustainable ones.
Yep.
I've covered the Scottish government's procurement in terms of what they had. And then looking at other programs through all of this, there seems to be one of these consistent streams, with the exception of, again, the Virginia example, is that organizations have said we're automating without actually engaging, without actually addressing the biggest concern that the majority of small, medium suppliers want to have, which is, what do I get for my time? What do I get through this elongated process? So it's not an automation question, it's education and engagement question. You win business before the RFP is issued by building what's known as legitimate preference, as Judy calls it, with the target of business you want to go after. Never mind getting 1,000 RFPs and responding. You're not in the RFP business. Build rapport and relationships, and then streamline that engagement. So when I went through your survey and I filled it out, you're going to get that from me. I was looking at it from the standpoint of, what do I get from this from a supplier small business standpoint? What are also recognizing that most buyers have what they call their 5 or 6 primary that they feel comfortable with, that they will repeatedly go to. So those are situations there, and then I can go to this Sir Phil Green report and all the other ones that I've been tracking over the years. But the reality is, I think it comes down to the same principle. Automation is not the answer in and of itself. Process and addressing the process breakdown, and that's where I got the feeling that we're Cimple's coming into a certain degree. That was my thinking and perception.
And so you've kind of hit the nail on the head. In that, frankly, everyone in this space is talking about AI and automation for everything. But AI and automation is, frankly, utterly pointless if you don't have the data infrastructure that underpins it and the user experience that will attract people to contributing more and more data to drive that automation and that intelligence. We actually spend a lot of the time when we're talking about the platform that we're building, not focusing on the AI and what we're developing and how it's going to work, but actually on the basis which is that we're going to give everyone one place to go to do everything, and it will become smarter and smarter and smarter, and it's not going to cost you anymore the more it evolves, and it's going to give you, in particular as a small organization, efficiency and optimization and growth where you would never have achieved it before. The massive limitation on me as a business, if I generate below 2 million in revenue or below 5 million in revenue, is that I'm limited by how many different platforms I can manage and maintain to try and grow my business. And that's not just in the public sector, that's public and private sector. And the architecture for Cimple is that you join the organization, you join the platform, and the platform enables you to toggle between being a buyer and a supplier. So we're already bringing in private sector organizations that we're flipping from being a supplier trying to win government contracts to buying their own stuff through the platform. And that's because we've been able to create a single, unified, consistent, simple experience that anyone can pick up and use. And that's something that's fundamentally different, I think, to anything that's come in any kind of e-procurement software or any kind of sourcing software. We talk about a lot about how we as a business are actually a content platform rather than a purchasing platform. Because actually what we're doing is sucking in data from all sorts of different data sources, and through a simplified UI, providing an optimized experience to do B2B. And that could be anything and everything going forward.
David, any questions?
No, it strikes me that it's sort of, it can flip from B2B to B2C, in an instant, if you like, depending on what your drive is. And I think the one thing that I've always witnessed around many platforms is, and to John's point particularly, which is the sort of the agent-based approach, which is one of the things, and I should explain, my area of research is in behavioral science. That's my PhD area, if you like. So I'm very much interested in, what motivates people to do something, as opposed to you get the 3-line whip from the company saying, we're going to use this new system come hell or high water. And I differentiate between compliance and adoption. So compliance is, I've filled in all my details, I've got my user profile, I've logged in, I've allocated the contracts, that's it, I'm done. I've checked out the system, I'm gone. And so you can get lots of that, but it doesn't give you anything at all by way of value. The value, in a sense, comes out of the adoption, which is I start using the system, all its different, I'll call it formats, guises, all the rest of it. So I think for me, that's the differentiator in terms of people starting to use systems. And it's interesting. I mean, I'm currently running a research project with another professor at the university at the moment around the sort of the behavioural attributes, if you like, or the behavioural pieces of procurement, particularly digital procurement. And what it's interesting, the different responses that we're getting, different sectors, and again, it just comes down to this fact that the individual is such an important part of all of this, and the greater good piece, in a sense, is whilst it sounds wonderful, the reality is that actually, if individuals are not motivated or can't find motivational strands in what the proposition is, then they will just check out. Whether you say that that's part of the company policy or whatever, it doesn't matter.
No,
it doesn't cut it.
And this is where I 100% completely agree on you. And this is the crux of where I think so many people have got it wrong for so long, which is so much of the time software of this nature has been built for one core user base to basically enable a buyer in an organization to go from A to B to C. And that's ultimately what it's been. And there's never been an approach which has actually taken the other side of the coin and go, actually, what do we need to do to enable a supplier to be incentivized to continuously use this platform for everything, day in, day out? And how would we change the things on the buyer side in order to make that happen? Because that specific thing is the area that we focus on the most, which is the buyer wants to do this and we will help them do that and 100% deliver that as a process. But all of the supply chain efficiencies are all created because of a complete lack of ability to drive incentives to make suppliers want to contribute and to do something. Perfect example, resilience and risk in supply chains. Any of the resilience and risk tools that are only doing two things. They're either telling you to provide the data on tiering, which naturally a buyer doesn't have, or they're scraping publicly available information and aggregating it to come up with a best guess. Not a single one of them have actually managed to get a supply chain onto a platform to start contributing their own information, because they haven't worked out that the way that you solve that problem is by incentivizing them to do that. So I genuinely cannot agree with you more on the point that you just made. And that is where we are focusing heavily. What can we give a supplier to make sure that every single day that Cimple is the first platform that they pick up in the morning, and it's basically where they run their entire business up from? That's what we believe we can build.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting if I could just interject, because again, perfunctory performance is what I call it, or participation. I look at this from a macro level and micro level. What made Virginia successful is within a period of 2.5, 3 years, they grew the number of suppliers signed onto the program, yes, but simultaneously their distribution of winning business expanded by 10 to 15 points over the growing supply base. In other words, it was no longer the Pareto of the same 20 going in. And that measurement tool was very, very important for them at the micro level, because if you're just signing up suppliers and you just have names, it means absolutely nothing. You've got to be able to prove that. Now, on the macro level, and this I'll go back to the D&D example, they were struggling with 51% next day delivery to support their IT infrastructure of all their military bases. Within the end result, within 18 months was this, is they went from 51% to 97% next day delivery. The business distribution amongst suppliers tripled, and the cost of goods that they were paying, because MRO is very volatile, not like direct procurement. They over a 7-year period, they saved on average 23 to 27%. by broadening the market. See, by making the market bigger and bringing in more suppliers, it created a competitive environment. Now, what's interesting about this, and this is the third step in the automation, within 18 months, they went down from 23 buyers to 3 FTE buyers because of the automation. But none of that tail end at the macro level would have happened if it wasn't efficiently engaged at the micro level. If it didn't make it easy and accessible, yes. If it didn't make it that it would expand and that there would be tangible proof of life, and I say proof of life, proof of business, because I'm not going to invest any time if there's no return on it. I may do it once or twice, but that's it. So what you're saying that interests me the most is your angle of addressing it from the micro to macro level rather than the macro to micro level. That's my take on what you're doing. I mean, would that be a fair statement?
Yeah. You make something beautifully simple that the crowd loves, the crowd will come.
Yeah. All right.
And that's never really happened in the software market that we work in. And to give you so the government in the UK has a 33 and a pound to go to SMEs. It's currently achieving about 21%, or 21p. We hit on average 38 pence in a pound goes to an SME. On spends budget versus delivered, we're about 20% below. So by creating, as you've both articulated, by creating a very, very, very simple and very clean experience that users love, you increase participation, which increases competition, which drives greater benefit, drives greater automation.
And by the way, just a side note, and I think, David, you mentioned it, it's not just the private sector or the public sector, but the private sector. I don't know if it was Wyndham who said that, but there was a major US retailer who worked on vendor compression strategy to shrink down the number of suppliers. The mindset behind that was to say, well, number one, with fewer suppliers, they'll give us bigger discounts and we'll have savings. Number two, the administrative cost of dealing with fewer suppliers would mean that we would also have savings. Now, they did this within the realm of again, indirect MRO materials. By the time we were called into the US to have a look at it, they said, do an analysis. We found out that they're paying more than 20% above the going market rate because they're, what they call, we're looking for truth. What is that? The information, the truth, proof of results. And they said that what was happening is that they had initial savings when they compressed, but as the market changed and price changes because of the volatility, their truth became narrower and narrower because the only information or data they had was based upon who they were dealing with and not what was actually going on into the marketplace. And that's another thing that I think you're talking about here is that engagement of understanding. That's a key point when you go to the government or public sector or any private sector business to say, how do you know? How do you know you're driving the best results? How do you know you're engaging the optimal level of suppliers where business distribution is an incentive rather than a disincentive? That's really where I see your sort of thinking is. Is that right?
In particular, and this definitely, and this is where it leads slightly into the AI and the automation piece, which is historically the reason why people have driven to a more and more restricted economies of scale are the only thing that works, and therefore you need to get to fewer suppliers and fewer people, and that's the way you should go. But that it relies on a human-led model. So the more and more that our platform can do all of the heavy lifting and the automation, the intelligence, and still give you variation, because variation creates de-risking, as you've articulated, the more that we can do the heavy lifting, the more benefit that you're going to get out of it. And you're going to be able to deliver the operational efficiencies that you want to, while seeing even greater improved results and even greater security of supply.
All right. Well, then, you know what, David, you and I are going to be talking again later today.
Yeah.
So just a couple of things. We'd like to, I'm sure you'd be available for a follow-up call.
Yeah, for sure.
That's number one. Number two, and you've probably noticed my Fireflies note taker, it's recording this session. I like spontaneous, real conversation, which is what we have. I don't imagine it would be a problem if I were to share this recording with people. I don't think you've given us any top secret information that would undermine it. And David, your usual brilliance and wisdom will shine through as well. So I'd like to share this and start building the momentum regarding Cimple, so that people become aware of it. Because when I did the survey and I saw the post, I understood at a high level what you were doing, but there is a certain and cynicism that is out there that we want to get behind. We want to get to that micro level versus macro level and understanding where your value is. So that's just a heads up that this will be shared, but we will talk again. David, we'll talk more this afternoon as well. But I've got to run, but thank you so much for your time, gentlemen.
I was just on what you've just said just before we hang up. We're not doing anything differently. Like when you articulate the value proposition of the platform, that we haven't built anything that's rocket science and we're not doing anything differently. It's how we're approaching fundamental principles that underpin the delivery of a solution like this. That's how we're doing something differently.
And that's what David referred to when he said agent-based modeling versus equation-based modeling. Traditionally with technology, it's an equation-based approach of build the technology and work in that direction. Agent-based understands the individual elements and components. We simply put, they call it people, process, technology. Because no matter how great the technology is, and we're going to look back on this technology 10 years from now, and we'll have the same sort of dismissive attitude we now have towards floppy drives and 256K RAM. The technology will never fix a bad process, a lack of participation. You need to create and address that. So agent-based modeling is the way to go. Gentlemen, just really great talking to you. We'll be in touch again, Wyndham, and David, talk to you soon.
And any questions, you know where I am. You've got my contact details.
Perfect.
If you want to do a follow-up, Wyndham, I'm quite happy to do that as well, given our connection with Howard. More than okay.
All right.
Let's do that.
Take care, gentlemen. A pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Bye.